Hi, and thank you for joining us on this episode of the Rio Grande Valley Business Journal's podcast. I'm Naxieli Lopez Puente, and today we are talking all things international trade with our guest, Bridge Director for Pharr, Luis Bazán. Luis, thank you so much for joining us on this episode.
On the contrary, thank you, Naxieli, for accommodating us. It's been a crazy busy morning, and thank you for being here and your team. It's great to be here. It's finally making it happen after a couple of weeks of trying, right?
Of course. And so the big headline, right, is Pharr is expanding its bridge. You're going to double almost the capacity, is my understanding?
That is the goal. Yes, ma'am. So what we're doing is we're basically working on several projects. We're investing about $150 billion $150 million in new infrastructure for the port of entry, but also as part of a bridge expansion. What I mean by a bridge expansion, it's a physical bridge. So we'll eventually have two bridges that combine into one to expand our capacity, to basically make things faster trade, zero wait, and at the end of the day, just bring in more business.
And so what does this mean for produce, for everything that comes through the city of Pharr?
So if you want to put just kind of like an example, right? Let's give you an example so it can be easier to be understood. So right now, the Pharr International Bridge, we cross about 5,000 trucks, inbound and outbound, import and export every single day, right? 30% of those trucks are considered to be certified. That means that they are vetted by the federal government. That means that they've gone through rigorous inspections, rigorous scrutiny to ensure that their entire supply chain matches up, that everything is set to go, so that when they step inside the footprint of the federal government, that they either require no scrutiny or very minimum, right? Minimum invasion, as they say. So what we're doing here with the Pharr International Bridge and the expansion is we're building two fast lanes, F-A-S-T, free and secure trade, all the way from Mexico, from the start of the commercial import line for us, all the way to the United States. That is where the zero wait comes into play, because it's going to be a lot faster. So that 30% of those trucks, when they're coming through, they're finally going to see the benefit of that, because right now there's no actual benefit. You have to cross the bridge. You finally have to get inside the import lot. And then that's when the benefit kicks in. When you have the lanes all the way from Mexico, that makes it official. And what that does, it just speeds up the process for them. It expedites trade. It gets the product to the market, to the end consumer in a faster fashion. Right. So our goal at the end of the day, through our strategic plan, is to get to go from 30% to 60% certified conveyances, certified trucks, companies, drivers, the entire supply chain, so we can push trade faster. So what that means for somebody like in the produce world, which are not necessarily vetted, which are not necessarily, part of the certification process, as is any product that's automotive, medical, things of that nature, technology based. What that means for them is that you move those trucks out of the way faster, you make more room for them. So we add capacity. Just alone right now, with some of the smaller improvements we've been doing here in the last few years, we've been able to add about 30 or 40% more capacity inside the port, just by pushing out northbound empty trucks and having them circle back and go for more and coming back around into Mexico, as an example, right?
Got it.
So it'll, again, expedite faster trade.
And so you said earlier that you're about 80% done on that construction.
That's correct. So we're at 80%. We started our project. We broke ground on this project along with another project that I'll talk about here in a minute inside the port back in August of 2024. And we're at 80% of the construction that's done. That is the status update. We'll be done within the first quarter of 2026 and become fully operational sometime within the March timeframe of 2026.
Got it. Okay. And so there have been a lot of changes, right, when it comes to what we're seeing as far as trade, from tariffs to an English language.
Lots and lots.
Yeah. So talk to me, what have you seen in regard to trade and the tariffs and the threat of tariffs? Have you seen a slowdown? Talk to us about that.
So I tell everybody, we're not going to see any direct result of tariffs right now. We're not even going to see it through the first part of 2026, maybe not through the end of 2026.
Why is that?
Because there's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of shifting of trade. There's a lot of movement of information. There's a lot of people that are more important than us making these decisions, right? At the federal level, top folks at top levels. So at the end of the day, we can fight it all we want. We can move whatever we want to move as far as information, but it's not going to make any difference until those top decisions are made. That's when we'll start to see how things shift. If things decreased, if they increased, what is going to happen? What we've seen here in Pharr, and I've been talking about it here since the beginning, even before tariffs hit back in March of 2025, since February of 2025, we were seeing what I call a seesaw effect, where we're seeing a month we were up, a month we were down, a month we were up, a month we were down. But we don't attribute it to that because there's a lot of other factors and variables that affect trade. Prime example, when there's a government shutdown, perfect example, but not just in the U.S., in Mexico.
Right.
When there's a blockade in Mexico.
And there was a blockade.
There was a blockade recently, and there's been many other blockades.
Sure.
It's just not good news, right, for anybody. It's not good for trade. And at the end of the day, all of those factors, work together sometimes, unfortunately, to make things slower for everybody.
Sure.
And that's when you start seeing the numbers shift on a month-to-month basis. But when you start comparing us to fiscal year or calendar year,
what is it
that's when we start seeing the climb, right? So right now we're seeing upward trends of 3 to 4%, even upwards of 5%. When you factor it all in and you take the last, since 2001, all the way to now, compound annual growth rate, that's over 10, 15% annually, right? And I know the state comptroller was here earlier, and he was talking about some numbers as well, and what that means for the state, the product or the commerce that goes through this bridge. But at the end of the day, it's going to take some time to figure it all out. Nobody's going to give you a straight answer on that. Nobody has the answer. And we still have to wait to see what's going to happen with the current trade deal, the USMCA. So there's Canada, United States, and Mexico. Speculation is pointing towards maybe it's going to be a bilateral agreement, just U.S. and Mexico, and only U.S. and Canada as an example, right?
Right.
But we're also seeing things that could shape the future of trade that could go beyond that. Maybe trade deals with other major countries that are going to the table, that are negotiating, that are trying to work out the deals where the tariffs make more sense for everybody that is involved with that, right?
Okay, and going back to slowdowns, things that slow down trade, drivers being not proficient, but being able to answer questions that are directed to them in English. Have you seen, obviously it's been enforced more, have you seen any issues, any slowdowns, anything like that? Because I know we spoke to the I think the Stark Amargo Bridge people, and they said, we have had drivers who have had to be stopped, and the truck stays there until somebody else can come pick it up.
Well, that's been the case, but we haven't seen an impact on that here, to be quite honest with you. We just had a sit down recently with DPS, and it's coming. I mean, don't get me wrong, right? They have to follow the law, to be able to know the law, read it, understand it, and speak the language, right? We understand that, but I think because the Rio Grande Valley and all the ports of entry at let's say at the state level, we've been really pushing hard to ensure that the border communities, that the border cities like Pharr are not affected by this, because a lot of these drivers, they're not going in further into the United States. They're staying within the region here. They're going east and west, not so much northbound, right? So because the main language here is Spanish. 99% of the people here speak Spanish. We're not seeing a direct impact just yet. I'm not saying we're not going to, but we're not looking forward to that either. We're not counting on the negative stuff. We're counting on the positive stuff. We're doing our efforts to educate the public, to educate the trade community, to educate our drivers. We're part of an association called Canacar. Canacar represents all the major transportation lines or the majority of the transportation lines in Mexico, as an example. So we're working with them hand in hand. I know one of them in particular, one of those owner operators is working jointly with STC to offer English classes for CDLs, things of that nature.
Okay.
So we're doing our efforts from an educational standpoint to ensure that these drivers are prepared for the future and that they're not scared to drive. Because if the truck is good to go, if the product is good to go, the driver should not have any issue, especially not in the border regions, right? And that's a collective, unified voice that we've been working on through our state partners, through the Border Trade Advisory Committee, and some of those other folks.
Perfect. So anything else that you would like to add? I know you guys had a busy day today. The Texas comptroller, like you said, was here. He gave some pretty big numbers about the impact of not just Pharr, but the ports here
Correct.
In the Rio Grande Valley.
Absolutely.
Can you share some of that data with our viewers?
Sure, absolutely. So luckily for us, we had done our research. We put out a trade numbers publication once a year. Pharr trade numbers in our case. A lot of other ports are doing their own. We have been doing it longer. And what that shows is that the numbers that we've put together, the data that we've collected, is precisely what the State Comptroller of Public Accounts, Mr. Kelly Hancock, was reporting on. Obviously, he went into much further detail. He talked about net jobs created through our efforts here in the entire port system.
Right.
We're part of that port system for Hidalgo because we fall within that district. But we're the only international bridge that caters almost specifically 100% to trade. All the other ones in that port or in that district, not so much. So if you go into their website, the information you're going to find pertains specifically to Pharr. So we were good to see those numbers match up. Like I said, netting about 92,000 jobs as a direct impact of trade here. But more importantly, just the value of trade. And I always talk about how there's no correlation sometimes between the number of trucks and the value of trade, because the value of trade keeps going up, especially with products that are manufactured in the automotive industry, the medical industry, technology, things like that. Even obviously produce. We're the #1 produce bridge, right? But all those values keep adding up. Right now, we're crossing about $50 billion in trade, which is what the State Comptroller of Public Accounts was reporting on as well. So again, I think it makes a huge impact having him here locally, boots on the ground, specifically with leaders like him, so that they can actually see it for themselves. It's one thing when you're in an office and you're just kind of hearing it or seeing it in the screen or reading about it, but when you're in town, where you're in the home base and you get inside the port and CBP tells you exactly what's going on and you get to see it for yourself, it makes a much greater impact.
All right.
No.
Well, Luis, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time to, talk to us about the issues surrounding international trade and how busy the port is. So thank you.
Well, we're on our way to the top, and we're not going to stop. There's a lot to do. There's a lot of work ahead, a lot of more investments coming, more projects. So just keep an eye out because there's way more where this came from.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. All right. And for you at home or at work, make sure to subscribe and catch us next week.